Hey, the game sequels are never ending and graphics are always improving, so today we're looking at 10 big graphical jumps in video game sequels. Now keep in mind, this is volume 2. This is the second one in an ongoing series, because it's pretty up to your personal opinion, and we've been taking your suggestions from the comments, so be sure to let us know of some more. But anyway, let's get started off with number 10 and talk about Street Fighter 3 Third Strike to Street Fighter 4. Now, this style change wasn't actually as massive as a shift you'd expect, and I think its restraint is really impressive because, yes, on the one hand, it does jump to 3D. But what the 3D graphics do, instead of just making it go, ooh, look, now it's Street Fighter in 3D, is kind of just realizes some of the ideas that the previous games were working on. Some of the designs in the environments, just a general look of the characters, but not going overboard and making it a whole new thing, you know? Still, I think it's important to note the jump from Street Fighter 3 to Street Fighter 4 because that was a specific point in time for the series, and the move to 4 was pretty tricky and they could have screwed it up, but thankfully it paved the way, and the Street Fighter 5 after that continued that style, if only just kind of improving on it. I mean, we did go from 1999 to 2008, and that is a pretty big jump, obviously, for technology, but the reason we like talking about games like this is just like the realization of stuff. Street Fighter 4 was really fun because after like an 11-year hiatus, you get to see some of the original characters in all their glory and how you would imagine them. You could see much denser and deeper backgrounds. It really just was an exciting period of time for the series, and that's why we wanted to point it out. But next at number 9, let's go for something a little subtle from God of War 2 to God of War 3. Because the God of War games were always lookers back in the day. God of War 2, for example, if you could see it here, looked absolutely great. It was one of the last games to release on the PlayStation 2, and it was really amazing. But 3 took a long time to make, and when it did drop, holy crap. I think still to this day, it does really hold up. Yeah, save for the resolution, the detail is insane. They did put it out on PS4, and you really get to see what they did with Kratos' character model. He, of course, has always gotten the most attention in the games, but the jump from 2 to 3, like if you look at Kratos in 2 and Kratos in 3, it's almost downright shocking. You can see muscle fibers, you can see little details in his skin, you can see sweat, you can see veins. It really is almost overkill, but it's really intense and really cool to see. Not to mention the fact that God of War 3 was able to finally make good on just some of those epic, massive scale battles. The previous games had done them, but by the time 3 came around, they had the technology and the graphical capability to really sell it and not use a lot of visual trickery, where when you were climbing up on a Titan, like that was the whole Titan in the game, and it was wild, dude. The level of detail jump from 2 to 3 is absolutely incredible, and we wanted to highlight it. But anyway, let's move on to number 8 and talk about the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind to the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Morrowind dropped in 2002, and then Elder Scrolls Oblivion dropped in 2006. So while, yeah, okay, like the gap of time isn't absolutely huge, there was a big jump because technology and gaming was rapidly expanding at that time. New consoles were ramping up, and it's an interesting thing because Morrowind actually did eventually see an Xbox release as well as just being on PC. So for the first time, console players really got to see a game like this. And then by the time Oblivion came out as a full, more modern multi-platform release, people were able to really see what was going on, and what was going on was incredible. So what happened here was that Morrowind kind of set things up. It was kind of the alley-oop. It set things up for a giant, massive, explorable RPG world where you can go anywhere, do whatever you want, talk to anyone in any shop, and go around. But it was all very lo-fi. It was almost under-realized just because of the technology at the time. The map was so big, everything was so spread out, and detail was limited on the in-between points. There were long stretches of just boring gray mountains that at the time still felt amazing because it was a massive open world. Looking back, was a little rough. Then Oblivion came around and kind of filled in the blanks in a way. Oblivion gave us tons of detail and more of a real world look, and some will say that the shift to the more regular traditional fantasy style as opposed to Morrowind's kind of more high fantasy weird stuff style was a little bit of a downer, but you can chalk that up to just different regions in the lore of the Elder Scrolls games, of course. But what Oblivion had going for it at the time were these beautiful, endless forests. They were partially procedurally generated, but the landscapes, the draw distance, and just the light and color here was absolutely incredible and a complete far cry from Morrowind's more dreary Vardenfell. You know, again, it's like different areas, but still, I think Oblivion at the time was an absolute shock. And I gotta be honest, when I was younger and I was really excited for this game, part of my hype was just for the graphics alone. Still, don't want to discount Morrowind at all and that world. There are people out there that are recreating Morrowind in the Skyrim engine, and it's worth checking out because that world is still worth visiting, even if the graphics weren't as good. Next at number 7, we have Fallout 2 to Fallout 3. Now, of course, this is a big jump. The series kind of went dormant for a while until Bethesda scooped it up and put out Fallout 3 and changed the world as we know it, at least for a lot of fans. The original Fallout games were, if you don't know, more of a top-down affair. Things were a lot less detailed, and it was very much more of a top-down PC strategy-style RPG. Those are still kicking strong today, but at the time, for a game like that, you really couldn't imagine anything else until we finally set our eyes on Fallout 3, and holy crap. This is another one. I really like talking about this, filling in the blanks. Fallout 3 really, in a lot of ways, visualized a Fallout post-apocalyptic world in 2008. I mean, the Fallout series already had a lot going for it in terms of imagery. You had all the vaults, you had all the corporation stuff, you had that silly, quirky style, you had the armor. But to bring that all in a giant explorable 3D environment is worth mentioning here. Fallout 3 is an interesting one. Like, looking back now, it's a little more muddy. It released in a time where a lot of games were going for darker and grittier and greens and browns, but it still absolutely is worth highlighting that, you know, first experiencing the land that you're going to explore in the previous Fallout games, and then in Fallout 3, the first time you walk out of the vault and see the world. It's not only just a great example of like technology improving, but just the medium improving overall. It's insane. I've been using the word insane a lot this video, but let's move on to number 6 and talk about The Sims 1 jumping to The Sims 2. Now, The Sims 1, looking back, was pretty rough. It was pretty simple. You couldn't zoom in probably as far as you wanted, and when you did, you didn't really get the detail you wanted. Also, just capability-wise, it was a lot more limited compared to The Sims 2, which dropped in 2004, and then that really took the world by storm because that almost felt graphically, visually, even mechanically, what The Sims 1 should have been. Characters were much more polygonal. There was limited things you could do outside. Houses could only have a couple of different looks, and textures were just really rough. But The Sims 2 had much better looking characters. It also had a much more robust character creation system. It had more detail in your home, more options that can come with that. Funny enough, at the time though, because The Sims had seen so much mainstream success, I remember knowing a lot of folks that weren't hardcore PC gamers, but they did really enjoy The Sims, and when The Sims 2 came out, they were so excited to play it, but most people's PCs could not handle a game like that. I mean, look at it. At the time, those were some pretty kick-ass top-of-the-line graphics. Moving over to number 5, we gotta talk about Doom. And the Doom we're gonna talk about is Doom 2 and the jump to Doom 3. Doom 2 is so awesome. It's so good. Oh my god. Like, we just really love Doom here. And the Doom style was very cool for its time. It's very iconic. It's still kind of hip and trendy today. You see some of those images of the classic characters still in a lot of popular video game culture. And not to mention the fact that the game was already pretty advanced considering you were a character and you could technically move around and shoot in a 3-dimensional space. That's why the Doom games were so fun and amazing in the first place, and then Doom 3 happened. Doom 3 dropped way later in 2004, and although it was a complete departure for the series in a lot of ways, it looked damn good. I think the game almost sold itself on how good the graphics were. It was one of those games to, at the time, really impressively use darkness and lighting engines. Like the light and shadows here in screenshots. As a young teen looking at this in a magazine, it just like blew me away. The game did go for more of a horror approach, but what we got with that were some shocking looking character designs, some spooky dark hallways with flashes of electricity or fire, and enemies that got right up in your face. And it's really funny that they don't look that great now, but they were awesome back in the day. Graphically, at the time, it was one of those games that kind of just pushed the medium forward. And seeing that, like compared to Doom 2, is just worth pointing out here. Now next at number 4, we have Battlefield 2 to Battlefield 3. Battlefield 2 dropped in 2005, while Battlefield 3 dropped in 2011, and it kind of made huge waves for looking amazing and being just downright huge. Not to mention though, not to slight against Battlefield 2, because at the time it had some really impressive weapon models and really large environments that when I had initially played it, I was very, very impressed. But 3 was on a whole nother level. Do you guys remember that first trailer, that first like gameplay trailer of Battlefield 3? You know, with the soldiers like in the Middle East, like going through buildings and going on a rooftop and dealing with a sniper. I think me and a lot of people watched that trailer over and over again in anticipation for this game and just how good it looked. It was one of those games, you know, and thankfully still to this day, Battlefield 3 lives on in the hearts of many of a Battlefield fan, and I remember seeing this game on PC looking amazing, and then also trying to look really good on consoles, doing little graphical tweaks and tricks with the lighting that we hadn't really seen in games before at the time on consoles. Still, it was a downright powerhouse and really kind of set the stage for what people would expect from Battlefield games going forward, and ever since, Battlefield games have looked absolutely incredible, and they really try and push things to the limit with the capabilities of like all the systems going on and vehicles and massive environments. The fact that up close and personal the game can look this good is awesome, and we kind of have Battlefield 3 to thank for that, for like pushing the series forward. Now down to number 3, we got another one that might seem a little more subtle if you look at it at first glance, but that's Super Mario 64 to Super Mario Sunshine on GameCube. Because you might think that, you know, the most important thing is Mario's shift from 2D to 3D, and yes, it is, but we've highlighted that in so many videos before. We wanted to talk about something different here, and the jump from 64 to Sunshine is nuts. I mean, look at it here. This is cool. While you were oohing and ahhing over like Mario 64 being in 3D, Super Mario Sunshine took things to the next level with larger environments, bright colors, tons more detail, new lighting effects, and also new water and ink effects that were unlike anything we had really seen. Also, not to mention, something I want to point out is like the first time we really got to play a game where Mario's face and his design is fully realized and modern and like how we see him today. Yeah, I know he's got his sleeves rolled up and he's got different equipment and all that, but the Mario face is rendered basically how we see him today. Also, I want to just take the time to point out that Super Mario Sunshine is very different and very unconventional for a Mario game, but also at the time, Nintendo had used a lot of trickery with GameCube tech and programming to make this thing look that good. Also, side note, totally off topic, but we've been talking about this forever, Nintendo needs to bring this game back in some form. Please, I know they're not watching, but please guys, come on. Now next at number 2, let's talk about the jump from Max Payne 2 to Max Payne 3. Because believe it or not, the jump from Max Payne 1 to Max Payne 2 was already significant. Max Payne 2 at the time for a little while served as sort of a hallmark or a benchmark for having a cool gaming PC because of the engine. Also, they fixed Max Payne's face. Max Payne 2 was running a lot of impressive technology at the time, including having ragdoll physics and just real world physics and just objects around the environments and stuff. That was a big deal at the time, being able to like shoot a bottle and see it break or kick over a cardboard box. That was huge. This game had stuff like that. It had cinematic camera angle shifts and just better slow motion technology and detail. But years and years and years down the line after a hiatus, Max Payne 3 in 2012 stepped the game up big time. I mean, look at this. Even still, this game dropped in 2012. It's 2019 now, we're talking about it. It still looks really good. The detail here is unparalleled. Max's shirt realistically moves and sways with his body as he jumps and flings around the environment. Clothes actually sit on a person's frame. Max will sweat through the clothing. Blood will stain. Water will stay wet for quite a while and dry realistically. Office rooms and parking garages and pillars and sheetrock will shatter and fly everywhere and explode in all different and fantastical ways. Levels were massive and also realistic looking. Enemies were torn apart by bullets and collapsing realistically with an even more advanced physics engine. It still looks good. It's just so detailed, cinematic, and just incredibly impressive. And it's one of our favorites, so we wanted to highlight it. But finally, at number 1 for this list, because we got plenty more down the horizon, we want to talk about The Witcher 1 versus The Witcher 2. This is quite a jump in budget too, but mostly just in graphical design. Look at The Witcher 1, which, you know, was a 3-dimensional game with characters, with faces, with some detail here and there, but look at The Witcher 2, man. The Witcher 2 still looks absolutely incredible when you're running it on a PC. The detail is really something else in the environment and just some of like the lighting tech, and there was a lot of bloom lighting going on. But not only that, look at Geralt. Geralt in The Witcher 1 and Geralt in The Witcher 2, like this is where we're starting to get the Geralt that like we now all know and love, at least in the game series. And what helped make Geralt look so cool and so interesting was the technology behind him. The polygon count in his face, the detail, the way the lighting would hit his face. That's what made The Witcher 2 and all the characters throughout The Witcher 2 that you spent time talking to be so compelling. It was because the graphics really sold it. It convinced you of the world, it convinced you of the people inside of it, and it made you want to stay there and learn more about it. The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings was in 2011, and we still don't think to this day it gets enough love for just how damn good it looked. And also just to serve as a great example of CD Projekt Red really stepping their game up as a studio from The Witcher 1 to The Witcher 2. We think this is a really cool example of games improving graphically through their sequels, but there are so many more examples out there, so we want to hear from you guys down in the comments. What game in a franchise like from one to the other has made such a jump that you think it's worth talking about, be it just graphical fidelity, world size, detail, whatever. Let's talk down in the comments. We want to hear what you guys think because your comments on the last video were so good. But if you enjoyed this video and had fun, clicking the like button is the best way you can help us out. We'd really appreciate that. And if you're new, consider subscribing and hitting that notification button because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.